Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking a truly fascinating framework from our source material about the structural mechanics of success. We're going to dive into the undeniable biological costs of using spite as your fuel, and most importantly, how to profoundly shift your mindset toward what the text calls undeniable excellence. Now, if you've ever felt the friction of criticism, or just the pure exhaustion of trying to prove people wrong, you're definitely going to want to pay close attention to the mechanics we're about to map out.
We kick things off with a pretty powerful structural reality. The source material states it super plainly. Haters occur in proportion to admiration. Doing anything notable in this world is going to generate both positive and negative reactions of virtually identical intensity. We so often think of pushback as a sign that we've done something wrong, but this establishes right out of the gate that friction is simply a byproduct of momentum.
Let's jump right into Section 1, the mathematics of hate.
The source actually frames these social dynamics as a literal law of physics. The law of equal and opposite polarization dictates that the intensity of admiration is directly proportional to the intensity of outrage. Think about what that actually means. It's mathematically impossible to be a life-changing presence to some people without simultaneously being viewed as a complete joke by others. If your work has enough sharp, distinct edges to deeply resonate with someone, those exact same edges are guaranteed to slice against the biases or insecurities of someone else. And trying to avoid that reality, well, that leads us straight into the delusion trap. Most people, let's be honest, spend their lives trying to play a rigged game. They try to maximize admiration while desperately trying to minimize friction. But according to the source material, this is a mathematical and sociological impossibility. If you try to round off all your edges just to avoid criticism, you fall right into this trap. Your work essentially becomes elevator music. Inoffensive, sure, but entirely forgettable. You lose the uncompromising edge needed to radically alter even one person's life.
The text contrasts this brilliantly with what it calls the mirror of potency. On one side, we have lukewarm output. This is where you play it safe, you satisfy everyone slightly, but you move absolutely nobody deeply. On the other side, potent output. This has sharp edges, it causes radical alteration, and yes, it absolutely generates friction and hate. The takeaway here is profound. If absolutely nobody thinks your work or your approach is a joke, it's really just a lagging indicator that you're producing homogenized, lukewarm output. Hate isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature of impact.
So that brings us to Section 2, the toxic fuel of spite.
The text challenges us right here with a massive diagnostic audit. Seriously, ask yourself, how many things are you doing in your life right now just to get back at somebody or prove them wrong? Are you actively fueling your ambition with the desire for vindication? It's incredibly common to use that friction as a motivator, but as we're about to see, relying on it comes at a staggering biological price.
In high-performance circles, there's this pervasive myth that spite is an elite fuel source. We've all heard the stories, right? People building empires just to shove it in the faces of their doubters. But when we analyze the neurochemistry, the math just doesn't hold up long-term. Spite, revenge, and vindication are powered by the sympathetic nervous system, your fight-or-flight response. You're constantly utilizing cortisol, adrenaline, and defensive dopamine. It is strictly an emergency fuel. As the text vividly puts it, running your life on spite is like continuously running nitrous oxide through a standard engine. It might give you a short-term, explosive burst, but eventually you are going to absolutely melt the engine.
The precise biological toll of that melted engine is what the text calls the allostatic drag. When you work to prove someone wrong, you essentially keep that critic as the subconscious anchor of your focus. This perpetually bathes your cells in a low-grade stress response. It elevates systemic inflammation, degrades your sleep architecture, and crucially, it flat-out kills creative, divergent thinking. Why? Because divergent thinking fundamentally requires a safe, relaxed, parasympathetic state. You simply cannot create your best work while your body literally thinks it's under attack.
All right, let's pivot to Section 3, the strategy of undeniable excellence.
This right here is the ultimate answer to the friction of impact. The best revenge is to be so undeniably good that there's no need to ever respond. This philosophy perfectly mirrors the ancient Stoic masters, as well as modern thinkers like Cal Newport, who advocate for the power of deep, undeniable skill. It proves that when you achieve a level of competence that is self-evidently elite, you render your critics completely irrelevant without ever saying a single word.
Because here is the harsh reality outlined in the source. The absolute second you attempt to argue or open your mouth to vindicate your name, you've already lost. Why? Because by responding, you instantly validate the critic's status as a peer whose opinion actually matters. You willingly allow them to siphon your time and your precious cognitive bandwidth, turning your focus completely away from creation and into a state of stressful defense.
Mechanically, the trap works exactly like this. First, criticism is launched. Next, you engage in active defense and argument. Finally, the critic wins. And they didn't win because they were right, they won because they successfully hijacked your attention and siphoned your bandwidth away from your actual work.
But look at the alternative cause and effect loop. First, criticism is launched, but then there is a complete non-response combined with aggressive self-improvement. The result? The criticism simply starves and becomes self-evidently false. By choosing not to engage verbally and instead pouring all that energy into your craft, the work speaks for itself. You defeat the friction through sheer, undeniable momentum.
Which leads us to our final part, Section 4, the intrinsic shift.
To truly execute at the highest possible level, you must regain absolute sovereignty over your metrics. You cannot measure your success by the look of defeat on a doubter's face. That is still letting them control your internal dashboard. Instead, you have to measure success solely by your alignment with your own potential. You focus on your goals simply for the sake of those goals.
The source captures this entire paradigm shift beautifully. It's the transition from a horizontal to a vertical focus. Horizontal focus means you're constantly looking sideways at who's mocking you, who's cheering for you, living entirely in a state of reactive defense. But vertical focus, that's looking straight down at the work, the protocol, the data, and the execution. It transitions you completely out of defense and into a state of pure offensive creation.
And that leaves us with an open invitation for a pretty profound psychological experiment from the text. Let go of the desire for revenge. Let go of the need for validation. Try focusing intrinsically and ask yourself this final lingering question. What would happen if you stopped? What incredible, undeniable things could you build with all that energy if you simply stopped trying to prove them wrong? Something to think about as you get back to your work.